You've been lied to. They told you that growth feels like motivation, that it's some radiant upward spiral, more confidence, more clarity, more wins. They told you that becoming a better version of yourself would feel good, that progress would come with a smile, a sunrise, and a vision board. But the truth is far more brutal and far more important. Real growth feels like death, not the poetic kind, not the gentle kind, but the cold, disorienting kind that strips you bare and leaves you gasping, wondering what the hell just happened to the person you thought you were. Because growth isn't about becoming someone new. It's about killing who you used to be. That's why it hurts. That's why it feels like grief. Because it is grief. And every time you evolve, you're forced to bury parts of yourself. Habits that felt safe, beliefs that kept you grounded, identities that once gave you meaning. You mourn your former self, whether you admit it or not. And if you don't understand that this mourning is part of the process, you'll keep trying to go back. You'll sabotage your progress just to avoid that pain. And you'll call it burnout, confusion, or resistance, when it's really just fear of letting go. This is not a feel-good video. This is not for the spiritually pampered or the emotionally shielded. This is a confrontation with your illusions, with your defenses, and with the part of you that still clings to comfort disguised as self-worth. Forget everything they told you about growth. Every platitude, every Instagram quote, every "just trust the process" slogan. Burn it all. Growth is not a gentle unfolding. Growth is war, and the first casualty is always who you thought you were. Carl Jung understood this better than most. He didn't write for comfort. He wrote for confrontation. He knew that every transformation comes with terror, because the psyche doesn't evolve through peace. It evolves through crisis, through breakdown, through the confrontation with your shadow, your wounds, your false masks. Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And he meant it. You don't heal by being affirmed. You heal by being dismembered, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, until only the truth remains, until only the uncorrupted essence survives. This video is a funeral for the version of you that cannot come with you where you're going. But it's also a call to arms for those who are finally ready to grieve with purpose, to suffer with direction, and to face the brutal reality that healing looks more like destruction than progress. So if you're looking for hope, look away. But if you're ready to grow, truly grow, then light the fire, dig the grave, and prepare to bury your old self. Because you can't build a new life until you've burned the old one to ash. You've been told to celebrate growth, as if it's a birthday party for your better self. But Jung would scoff at that idea. Because growth, in its rawest form, isn't a celebration. It's a ritual sacrifice, a psychological funeral. One where you stand over the corpse of everything you used to be, smiling on the outside, dying on the inside. The pain you feel when you're growing isn't a malfunction. It's the sound of your ego being pried from your bones. And your ego doesn't go quietly. It begs, it bargains, it lashes out. Because what we call self is a house of identities. And growth means setting fire to that house while you're still living in it. Carl Jung didn't paint healing in soft watercolors. He painted it in blood. His work on individuation, the process of becoming a true, whole self, was a direct confrontation with the unconscious. And what lives in the unconscious? Everything you've denied, everything you've rejected, everything that threatens the story you've been telling yourself about who you are. Jung described it as a descent, not an ascent. You don't rise into your true self, you sink into your depths, into the darkness, into the things you'd rather not name. Only there in the graveyard of your psyche can something authentic be born. He warned that most people would rather remain sick than face the agony of that journey. Because it's not just about fixing something, it's about losing something, permanently. Your innocence, your illusions, your sense of specialness, your victimhood, your comfort. And that's the paradox. You must mourn your former self while still inhabiting it, like a ghost wearing its own body, knowing it doesn't belong anymore. That's why so many people quit the process halfway. They can't tolerate the funeral. They want the resurrection without the death, the crown without the crucifixion. But there's no shortcut. The version of you that wants to grow is the same version that must die for growth to happen. Jung didn't believe in comfort. He believed in confrontation. with the unconscious, with the shadow, with the fragile ego that masquerades as your true self. If the first blow of growth is loss, the second is confrontation. And that confrontation doesn't happen in the light. It happens in the dark, in the grave you refuse to dig. This is the battlefield most people avoid. You don't just bury what you've outgrown. You bury the parts of you that never should have existed to begin with. The people pleaser, the mask, the coward, the manipulator, the passive victim, the arrogant genius. You've worn all of them, and they've protected you. But now, they're rotting. And you keep them alive because you're afraid that without them, you'll be nothing. Jung's work on the shadow is not for the weak. He described the shadow as the part of you that is primitive, instinctual, chaotic, the traits you repress to appear socially acceptable. But the truth is brutal. What you repress controls you. Silently, strategically. While you pretend to be whole, the shadow manipulates your every fear, every desire, every act of sabotage. To grow is to make that unconscious material conscious, and that is violent. Because when you look into your shadow, it looks back. It whispers things you've tried to silence for decades. Rage you said you don't have. Shame you thought you healed. Desires that disgust you. Truths that threaten everything you've built. Growth demands that you stop pretending, that you stand in front of the grave of the persona you perform, and let it rot without rescuing it. But most people can't do that. They call it healing, when really they're just rearranging their masks, painting over the cracks, framing their trauma like an art piece instead of dissolving the identity built around it. They want enlightenment without ego death. But Jung knew, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That's the real work. You don't find yourself by climbing toward light. You find yourself by entering the tomb and closing the door behind you. The war between who you are and who you were is not symbolic. It's not literary. It's biological, psychological, existential. And every time you resist it, every time you choose the comfort of the known over the pain of becoming, you prolong the suffering. You turn what could have been a clean death into a slow decay. That's what most people do. They drag their corpse behind them and wonder why life feels so heavy. Carl Jung made it clear. Transformation doesn't happen on your timeline. It doesn't care about your plans, your goals, or your fragile self-image. It begins when the old structure collapses, when the ego you've built becomes too small to contain the truth of who you are becoming. That collapse isn't elegant. It's brutal, and it has to be, because your old self won't go quietly. It will fight for survival. It will weaponize nostalgia, shame, guilt. It will make you believe that the familiar pain is safer than the unfamiliar freedom. And most of all, it will convince you that you can change without loss. But you can't. Every victory on this battlefield comes at a cost. A belief dies, a relationship ends, a delusion shatters, an identity is erased. You are forced to stare into the pit where your certainty once lived and walk forward anyway. Jung's entire framework of individuation was not about addition, it was about subtraction. You do not become whole by adding more roles, more knowledge, more performance. You become whole by removing everything that is not truly you. And that removal, that slow, surgical peeling back of false layers, is agony. But there is no other way. You either fight the war within and come out reborn, or you surrender to comfort and stay a prisoner in your own skin. Growth is grief, not because something went wrong, but because something finally went right. And grief is not a flaw in the system. It is the price of entry into a life that isn't built on lies. You don't wake up one day and think, I'm resisting growth. That's not how the war shows itself. It hides. It camouflages. It infiltrates your life through symptoms you've learned to normalize, until your identity becomes a graveyard of unexamined habits. It starts with fatigue that no amount of rest can fix. You're always tired, not because your body is broken, but because your psyche is. You're carrying versions of yourself that should have died years ago, and they're hungry. They feed on your energy, your time, your focus. You serve ghosts, not goals. You procrastinate, but not because you're lazy. You're avoiding tasks that would force you to step into the next version of yourself. You delay the job application, the difficult conversation, the gym, the journal, not because you don't care, but because on a deep level, you know, doing that task would mean changing. and change feels like betrayal to the part of you that's still attached to who you were. You chase distractions, binge content, overthink relationships, scroll endlessly. Not because you lack discipline, but because silence would expose the war. And if you sat still long enough, you'd hear the truth. You're grieving, but you've been trained to avoid grief, so you call it boredom, anxiety, restlessness. You pathologize what is actually the process of internal transformation. You stay in relationships that drain you, keep jobs that deaden you, repeat patterns that humiliate you, not because you don't know better, but because the cost of letting go feels like dying. And in a way, it is. That's how the war shows up. Not with swords, but with silence. Not with blood, but with compromise. And every day you don't face it, another piece of you dies in secret. Most self-help is a lie, not because it's evil, but because it's afraid. Afraid of telling you the truth, that you're not supposed to feel better right away. That growth, real growth, isn't soothing, it's shattering. Instead, conventional advice gives you pacifiers. Just journal it out. Take a deep breath. Positive vibes only. You're taught to regulate away the grief, distract from the death, and medicate the war within you into silence. It's not healing, it's sedation. And sedation is just avoidance in disguise. These approaches fail because they start with the wrong assumption, that you're supposed to feel good as you grow. You're not. If it feels good, it's probably ego-preserving, not ego-destroying. And ego-preserving tools don't build a new self. They reinforce the old one. You're not managing your triggers. You're protecting your persona. You're not reframing your thoughts. You're rationalizing your cowardice. You're not finding your center. You're hiding in it, so you don't have to confront the shadow that lives in the margins. The real reason these methods fail? Because they promise transformation without death. They try to take you from version 1.0 to 2.0 without ever forcing you to uninstall the operating system. But the old code will always corrupt the new one. You can't just upgrade, you have to wipe the drive. Jung didn't give you hacks, he gave you nightmares. Because you can't bypass grief. You can't meditate your way past the funeral. You have to sit in it, burn in it, and let it change you, cell by cell. The world wants you calm and manageable, but healing isn't calm. It's catastrophic. If growth is grief, then your routine must be ritual. You're not just building habits, you're preparing for psychological war. Every day must be designed like a battlefield, not to achieve comfort, but to fortify your will. The goal is not peace. The goal is power over your former self. Step 1. Begin with the grave. Start your day with confrontation. Before the world touches you, sit in silence and ask one brutal question. What part of me needs to die today? Not what to fix, what to bury. A belief, a habit, a fear, a narrative. Write it down. Name the corpse. That is your target. Step 2. Design for discomfort. Every growth ritual must include intentional disruption, cold showers, difficult conversations, saying no to what's easy, doing what terrifies you before 9 a.m. Why? Because comfort is the domain of the ego. Discomfort is the territory of transformation. You need to train your nervous system to stop interpreting pain as failure. Step 3. Track the deaths. You don't need a gratitude journal. You need a grief log. Write down what you let go of today, who you didn't text, what you refused to tolerate, what version of you didn't show up on purpose. Track your losses. They're proof you're winning. Step 4. End with the ashes. At night, don't ask, did I succeed? Ask, did I bury the coward in me? End the day like a funeral pyre. Burn the masks, mourn the comfort, and go to sleep knowing you're not seeking happiness. You're seeking transformation. This is not a lifestyle, it's a campaign. And you're not building the new you, you're killing everything that isn't. Growth doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's a relentless battle not just inside you, but against forces outside. Forces that want you weak, compliant, and predictable. Machiavelli named these forces fortuna, the unpredictable tides of luck, chaos, and external pressure, and virtu, your internal strength, cunning, and will to dominate your fate. Jung's psychological journey echoes the same tension. The shadow and the persona, light and darkness, destruction and creation. The world wants to keep you small. It rewards conformity and punishes risk. Your friends, family, co-workers, They all have a stake in your old identity, because when you change, you destabilize their world. You threaten their comfort. They become agents of fortuna, consciously or not, pulling you back into the graveyard of your past self. But growth demands that you rise in virtue, an implacable, strategic force that refuses to bow. This means conflict. It means tension. You will be tested, isolated, ridiculed. The old you will scream in protest, and so will the world around you. The fight is not just internal anymore, it's external. Jung understood that individuation is both an internal war and a social rebellion. To survive, you must train like a general. Know your enemies, external chaos and internal resistance alike. Adapt quickly, choose your battles. Sometimes victory means retreating to regroup. Other times it's a full assault. Your greatest weapon? The knowledge that the war is necessary, that every blow taken is a wound dealt to the prison holding you captive. Accept the tension, embrace the opposition. This is your battlefield. No peace is possible until you win. To dominate the war for your true self, you need strategies far beyond basic self-help. This isn't a journey, it's a siege. Here's how you fight, brutally and effectively. 1. Radical acceptance of pain. Stop treating pain as something to avoid. Reframe it as intelligence. Every hurt carries information about your growth. Embrace it, analyze it, weaponize it. You're not avoiding suffering, you're harvesting strength from it. 2. Strategic isolation. Temporarily cut ties with people who feed your old identity. Starve your ego of validation. Isolation forces the persona to crumble faster. You're dismantling support systems that enabled your weakness to build structures that fortify your authentic self. 3. Shadow integration as daily warfare. Regularly confront your shadow through brutal honesty. Ask daily, what am I avoiding today? Or what truth do I fear most right now? Write the answers, expose the fears, and refuse to stop until the lies lose their power. Shadow work isn't occasional therapy, it's constant warfare. 4. Ritualized risk-taking. Condition yourself to act before you're ready. Do something each week that terrifies your ego. Speak publicly, demand respect, break routine. Teach your mind to thrive in uncertainty. Each risk kills another piece of your old, fearful self. 5. Unbreakable commitment. Declare your intentions publicly and unapologetically. Stake your reputation on your transformation. Accountability isn't comfortable, it's strategic leverage. Tell the world who you're becoming so that retreating to your old self is humiliatingly impossible. You're not looking for ease or balance, you're here for conquest. These strategies aren't gentle suggestions. They're weapons for those committed to victory at any cost. Your old self must die. Now, execute the plan. You've heard the truth. Growth is not gentle. Growth is a war zone, a funeral pyre, a battlefield where your old self dies so your new self can live. Now, it's time for a choice. Will you stay in the graveyard of your comfort? Or will you stand, armed and unrelenting, ready to face the blood, the grief, and the chaos that growth demands? This isn't for the faint-hearted. Knowledge without action is cowardice. Understanding without commitment is surrender. So here's the challenge. Declare it publicly. Write it down. Say it loud. I am the prince of my own war. Post it in the comments. Make your word your sword. Because words forged in the fire of commitment become your strongest weapon against doubt, fear, and the ghosts of who you used to be. Remember, the battlefield is brutal, but the prize is power. Real power. Not the illusion of control, but the raw, implacable authority over yourself, your mind, your shadow, your destiny. You've been lied to. Growth is grief, but grief is the gateway to greatness. So grieve, fight, burn, and then rise. The war begins now.